often said that actions speak louder than words, but the truth is both are equally important. Have you ever felt confused about why someone that you love says one thing but does another?
The way you think about your actions and your words!
When I was a new therapist a long time ago, I remember feeling baffled when a person would say one thing and do another. Now, let me say, as a new therapist, I was dealing with overwhelming imposter syndrome.
Imposter!
Meaning I felt like, how in the world was I going to help people? And so at that time, when someone would say something that didn't quite seem to go together with their actions, I was not completely confident that I was, reading the room right, so to speak, correctly.
I'm confused.
Have you ever felt that way? Like when someone says they want to spend more time with you, but they never call you? So in therapy, for example, someone would say to me that they hated that they were not able to pay their bills, but they were buying new things all the time. Or they didn't like that they didn't have more time to themselves. And then in another session, they would tell me about new projects that they took on. I wondered, was I missing something? Was I not listening to the depth that I needed to listen? This was in the beginning of my work as a therapist. You know, ever since I was a little girl, I had this deep desire to understand people. My parents, myself, those around me, and I would persist in wanting to understand. I still do. Understanding brings me peace. But despite my self-doubt that I felt, I eventually learned something very valuable. That there are times when our inner world and our outer world are not aware of each other. I will say more about why this happens and what to do about it, but let me first share a story with you. By the way, I'm Dr. Pam. Being a therapist has been a lifelong passion, and one of the most important things that I have learned as a therapist is that to live our best life, we need thriving relationships. That's why I'm here to guide you towards living your best life. Okay, so recently I was working with a couple. Just FYI, I'm going to change some of this story to protect the privacy of those that I do work with. So this couple, I'll call them Jake and Alice. Jake, who's a hardworking man, proud of his family, has a ton of integrity, and deeply loves his partner, Alice. And he feels that he wants to spend every possible moment with her. He expresses that his life revolves around her, and that their bond is what gives him strength and happiness. But as he is talking, I'm also watching his wife, Alice, who, by the way, is also a hardworking, strong-minded woman. I mean, that's a compliment. She's someone who strives to do everything in the best possible way. But as I'm watching her, she is rolling her eyes while she's listening to Jake's words. And she sort of has this strained smile. Her fingers are nervously tapping. Her arms are crossed. I mean, it was evident that something was not okay for her. And I'm thinking, oh boy, this is going to be a very challenging tightrope to walk, because I knew that the shit is about to hit the fan.
Guys, the shit is about to hit the fan, okay?
She is in pain, and he is completely unaware, but loves her so deeply. So hearing her pain, I knew will hurt him too.
We're all hurting. Everyone's hurting.
She shared with me that he works all the time and rarely makes time for her, and she feels hurt and neglected. She felt a deep sense of loneliness, and despite the warm words pouring out of Jake, her outer world experience was very different. Jake's job demanded so much of his time. He often worked late into the night. Even when they were together, his mind wandered back to the relentless demands of his career. Does this type of disconnect sound familiar to you? So here it is. Jake's inner world, which is the love for his wife, and his outer world, which is that he works all the time, they don't match up. And first, let me say that this disconnect between a person's inner world and outer world is often a blind spot for them.
I don't see it.
They don't see it, and it can be very frustrating and confusing for the person on the receiving end.
Your words don't mean anything.
Even though I understand the concept, I still sometimes find myself confused when I see the disconnect. On one hand, it seems obvious to me, meaning the disconnect, and that's why I question why they don't see it. So our inner world, which is our thoughts, our feelings, our beliefs, our passions, and our outer world consists of our behaviors, our actions, and our interactions with the physical environment. When someone experiences what Alice was experiencing, a person who's in that situation will often say things like, "Your work is more important than me," or "I am not a priority in your life." And that will usually ignite conflict, because in Jake's mind, he loves his wife more than anything. And he is not at all aware that his actions don't line up with his love for his wife. But for Alice, it was so obvious that she couldn't imagine that he didn't know what he was doing. But after some work in therapy, Jake ultimately learned that he struggled with feelings of inadequacy in the relationship.
I'm not good enough for you.
He felt that he couldn't measure up to some idealized version of a partner that he believed Alice deserved. This sense of not being good enough made him hesitant to be vulnerable, as he feared Alice might see his perceived flaws and shortcomings and she might reject him, is what he feared. The sad thing is that he was actually rejecting her in a backwards sort of way, meaning he didn't realize that he was rejecting her. Things did get better for them when Jake learned of his disconnect, and he was able to understand the impact that he had on Alice, and they were able to work together and grow their relationship together. So why does this disconnect happen? This disconnect of our inner world and outer world. By the way, if you're enjoying this video, please consider subscribing so we can grow a community to connect and help each other. Okay, one big reason is that we must stop denying our emotions, suppressing them, burying them. I can't say enough. I want to shout it from the rooftop.
You would be screaming from the rooftops.
Because when we deny what we feel, we will have a disconnect with our outer world, because we are not aware of our inner world.
I don't know what I'm feeling.
Remember this: when you let the feeling begin, you let the healing begin. Another reason that this happens is lack of self-awareness. I can't say enough about the incredible value of self-awareness. Self-awareness can be liberating in so many ways. A woman that I was working with shared with me that she was working long hours in a demanding job. She went on to tell me all the things that she does in a day, like running her kids to all their activities, volunteering in her kids' sporting events, home repair things that she did. And the whole time she was crying and saying, "What is wrong with me?" she had no recognition that she was carrying a heavy, heavy load. She told me that she snaps at her children, often without understanding why. She cried and cried because she felt so awful about the way she was snapping at her children, who she loves so much and is so invested in them having a wonderful childhood. She would cry, and I would tear up too, because my heart broke for her. She was trying so hard in life and yet feeling terribly depressed without understanding why. She just was not connecting that her stress caused her irritable behavior. I cannot say enough about how many times people tell me that they are irritable, and when I ask them what's going on in their life list sounds daunting. Do you go through anything like this? I point out all that they are going through and how that would lead to anyone feeling irritable. They understand. But you know, as a culture, we are encouraged to shut down our emotions.
So those feelings of yours, shut them down.
But there are consequences when we do so. Think about how often people avoid talking about their childhood, unknowingly suppressing painful memories. When asked, people often rationalize it by saying their past is just uninteresting or it's in the past. But the truth is, it is avoiding emotion. In the case of the woman that I was talking about, she didn't understand why she was snapping at her kids. But when she eventually gained self-awareness, that she grew up in a family that expected a lot, too much from themselves and from their children, for her, this was normal, and it was normal for her to shut herself off from what she was feeling. Suck it up, she would often say, and yet she wasn't sucking it up, which, by the way, is never a good thing to do. Once she gained this self-awareness, she was able to let go of some of the things that she took on. She was able to engage in self-care, which she desperately needed and deserved. And she was no longer snapping at her children, and now she's living a much happier life. So now the really big question is, what do we do when our inner world and outer world are not aligned? So in my story that I shared with you with Alice and Jake, Alice's tips is that she can communicate her feelings. She can share with Jake how she feels. She can ask questions by prompting Jake to reflect on his behaviors and feelings. One thing to remember, though, that is asking questions can be complicated. I did a video on the complexity of asking questions and how it can lead to conflict. I'll link it below. Here's an example of how you would not want to ask a question. So you would not want to say, "Why are you always working? Don't you care about spending time with me?" A good question is, "I noticed that we haven't been spending as much time together lately, and I miss you. How do you feel about our time together?" Or you can say, "I understand that your work is demanding. Is there anything that I can do to support you so that we can spend more time together?" And for Jake, he needs to listen to Alice. Her feelings can be a mirror to understand what might be off for him, meaning what he's not seeing, that his inner world and outer world are not lining up.
From now on, we say what we feel.
So the unaware partner can benefit from self-reflection, open communication, and possibly professional guidance. But as I said, his wife can act as a mirror, offering gentle observations and asking insightful questions to help her husband understand and recognize the disconnect. These approaches can promote self-awareness, so super important.
Last, your actions fit your words.
Understanding of both you and your partner, empathy, and ultimately creating a deepened connection, which is what I believe we all want. So remember, this is so important. When you let the feeling begin, you let the healing begin. So thank you so much for watching. Do you experience either yourself or people around you who have a disconnect of their inner world and outer world? And what made you realize this disconnect? Or have you been able to help others around you recognize the disconnect? Share it with us. I'm sure it will be helpful to others in the comment section. I look forward to seeing you soon.